Formula One with Jenny Gow.
Good morning and welcome to Austria. It's round 11 of the Formula One World Championship and we're in Spielberg. It's such a beautiful location. There's mountains all around us. The track is small but, in my opinion, perfectly formed. Only 10 corners and we're ready for the sprint race. 24 laps around this Spielberg circuit, and alongside me, Ben Edwards will be our lead commentator. Ben, it's a beautiful day to go racing.
It really is a stunning day. It's very different to last year's sprint race, which was a bit damp, made for life, pretty exciting, but actually it's a beautiful day, as you say, and the crowds are already gathering up and getting ready for what should be an entertaining first race of the weekend.
And their wish has come true. Once again, it's Max Verstappen on pole, and the sea of the Orange Army is unavoidable when you come to Austria, and they have poured in their thousands. Mark Priestley, former F1 mechanic, you can excuse them and excuse us for thinking it's the Papaya Orange supporters, but not quite yet.
Not quite yet, but the Papaya crew may well have something to cheer about as the weekend rolls on, because it is incredibly close between Max Verstappen and Lando Norris, split by just 93 100ths of a second across this pretty short lap in qualifying, which means the race, there's still everything to play for.
I love it. I always, when that margins are that tight, I try and think of what could I try and achieve in 0.093 seconds. I don't know if a blink of an eye would be too long. What could you achieve?
Yeah, it's
nothing.
And I'll tell you what's also really interesting is trying to work out what that translates to in terms of distance on the racetrack. Like, how far ahead was he if they were on track together? And it's nothing.
Is it like a centimetre or something? It's that close, isn't it? The margins are so tight. And Ben, it's fantastic that the margins are that tight. It's taken us a few rounds to get there, but now the race is on.
Oh, it is, absolutely. Red Bull have been dominating the early part of the season, but in this last part, there's no doubt that Lando Norris, McLaren and Oscar Piastri, but certainly Lando, have really been challenging hard. Of course, we've also seen 2 wins for Ferrari this year, but they don't seem to be quite so strong here in Austria. It does look like McLaren, does look like Mercedes might be strong here too, although their qualifying didn't go quite as well as they would have liked yesterday. But you're right, Red Bull are not as dominant right now as they were in the early part of this year, and certainly as dominant as they were last year.
Okay, so something for the fans to be slightly on edge about today as they're cheering on. Remember, hashtag BBC F1 if you want to get in touch. Can you just, Ben, go down the grid and remind us of who starts where for this 24-lap sprint?
Yeah, indeed. Well, it is Verstappen starting from pole position with Lando Norris alongside him. So we've got the 2 rivals of recent races alongside each other. Piastri's 3rd, George Russell is 4th. Carlos Sainz first to the Ferraris in 5th place. Lewis Hamilton, a bit disappointed with how qualifying went. He starts 6th. Sergio Perez, Verstappen's teammate, is 7th on the grid. Then both Alpines, Ocon and Gasly, they're 8th and 9th on the grid. And Charles Leclerc, who failed to get a lap in the final part of qualifying, he's down in 10th. Could be worth watching Leclerc to see whether he can get further up the order. Out of the top 10, we have Kevin Magnussen, good effort in the Haas, in 11th on the grid. Lance Stroll 12th, Fernando Alonso 13th, Yuki Tsunoda 14th, and Logan Sargent for once out qualifying his Williams teammate. He's ended up 15th on the grid. Daniel Ricciardo 16th, then Nico Hulkenberg 17th, Valtteri Bottas, who got his first ever podium at this track many years ago, he's down in 18th place, Alex Albon 19th, and then Zhou Guanyu at the back in 20th.
Yes, and Albon actually will start from the pit lane, and they've done a lot of work on Yuki Tsunoda's car, replacing almost everything it looks like, but like for like, so no penalties there. And just a reminder, 69 points separate Verstappen at the top of the championship from Lando Norris, who's now 2nd in the championship. And Mark, there are points up for grabs, aren't there?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like a lot, doesn't it? 69 points seems like an absolute world away, but I'm not sure it's that big. You know, we've got a long way of this season still to go. We're not even at the halfway point, and the margins, as Ben said, between the 2 cars are so similar on a sprint weekend where there are extra points up for grabs. Today's race, this sprint we're about to watch, really means something.
Well, let's hand over to our commentary team, Mark Priestley and Ben Edwards.
The 3rd sprint race of 2024 is about to get underway, and is taking place in Austria in beautiful sunshine with some quite high temperatures. Air temperature up to 28 degrees. The tyre blankets are all coming off the cars right now, and it does look as though we're on medium tyres pretty much all round, Mark, as we go into this race.
Yeah, the data on our screen says every single car starts this race on medium tyres, and they've done a lot of work on that throughout the practice sessions. They know exactly how that performs. It's probably too long a race to try and go for the softer tyre, which would have given you a boost off the line, but maybe wouldn't last. And the hard tyre, just too difficult to get temperature in, and you risk losing positions without the ability to catch up on a relatively short race.
So 8 points for the win in the sprint race. It does give Max Verstappen the opportunity to get into 70 points ahead of Lando Norris, but can Lando put it the other way, because they're starting on the front row together. It's a 24 lap race, and as I say, in good conditions it's unlikely we'll go to a time limit, and qualifying will take place after this race for the Grand Prix on Sunday. So you really don't want to smash the car up in the sprint race, because there's only really 3 hours, just over 3 hours, between the end of the sprint race and the start of qualifying for the Grand Prix.
Yeah, it's a real factor, you know, because obviously on a traditional weekend we'd be sort of heading into FP3 now, which is not a competitive session, and you'd be highly unlikely to damage a car, at least seriously, in that scenario. But now the teams will be nervous, the guys in the garage will be looking on at these monitors, fingers crossed. They want their driver to do well, they want them to push the limits, but they definitely don't want them to step over them.
Let's see whether anybody can beat Max Verstappen. He's taken both of the sprint wins so far this year. We've had 2 sprints, but they were in China and Miami. He managed to win the sprint race in China from 4th on the grid, still went on to take the victory. Lando Norris didn't have a great time in the sprint race in China, but of course things got better in Miami in the main race for him. But so far, 2 sprint races, both won by Max Verstappen. Starting from pole, it's always tough not to win from pole position here. It's quite a tricky track in terms of overtaking. Not impossible, but we see more of it probably in the main race than we would in the sprint race.
Yeah, there's a very long straight. The main straight is very long, so there is opportunity, and I suspect Lando Norris will be hoping to drag his way behind Max Verstappen down to turn 1 and make the most of that opportunity.
Cars are just bringing themselves onto the grid now. It's fun, it's actually 60 years since the first World Championship F1 race was held in Austria. It was down the road on a different track, Zeltweg Aerodrome, but that was 60 years ago. Now we're in 2024, a very different style, of course, with a sprint race before we get into the main Austrian Grand Prix. But lots of fun to look forward to, and many fans already in the grandstands. Jenny.
Air temperature is 28 degrees, and just 2 of the drivers starting on new mediums, everyone else starting on used. They are Zhou and Bottas in the Kick-Saubers.
Okay, so everybody pretty much on the same tyre compound, and we shall see how they get on in these conditions. What's the mood in the garages right now? You're an ex-mechanic, Mark.
It's tense, very tense as the last cars now roll into position. Everybody's nervous, from the drivers to the mechanics to the engineers. Let's see how they get on.
So last few cars are moving into position. We're almost ready to go. The sprint race in Austria, all set to get underway. Max Verstappen and Lando Norris sharing the front row. Oh, we've got to pause. We've got to pause.
Start.
Yeah, we're not going to get a start immediately. They're going to do another formation lap. Now, I'm not sure what has caused that just yet. I haven't seen a reason.
No, we couldn't see anything. All the cars were in position, but the lights flashed on the start gantry, which indicates an aborted start. So they'll go round and do an extra formation lap. They'll then re-line up on the grid in exactly the same way. The race laps will be reduced by 1, and we should, in theory, go through the same procedure.
Just waiting for, they're all getting away, I think. Hulkenberg was a bit slow, but sometimes that happens if a car has stalled on the grid and they know it's not going to start, but that's not what happened. All cars have got away again on this second formation lap.
It could be a problem with the systems. It could be the start systems, for example. It could be something in race control where they weren't ready, something not up and running, and just to give themselves a little bit of extra time, this is a way they can go ahead and do that.
Alex Albon starting from the pit lane in his Williams after a terrible qualifying yesterday, being outgunned by his teammates Logan Sargent. He's now just having to sit in the pit lane right at the end. His tyres are getting cold and old, and tense times, and he'll feel that, won't he?
That's a good point.
Lack of running.
Of course, in the old days you'd be terribly worried about engines overheating in that kind of scenario, but today they can switch them off and even restart them from inside the car. They can switch them down to just one bank of the V of the engine running, so that's not an issue anymore. But you're right, tyres will start to get cold, brakes will get cold, and his first few corners will be a little bit treacherous.
no pit stops in a sprint race, as we were saying. That's not a standard part of it. I mean, you might end up doing a pit stop, but you'll basically lose any good position. So does that mean the mechanics are a bit more relaxed than they would be when they know they're going to have to get out of changing tyres in the main race?
To some extent, but of course you do always have to be ready just in case. So you can't really relax. You've still got to have all your gear on. You've still got to be ready just in case it happens.
So the start was aborted because photographers standing behind the barriers at turn 1 were posing a safety risk. So, yes, best to be safe than sorry.
Naughty, naughty.
Yeah.
I know.
Well, thanks for that, Jenny.
It might be that they did nothing wrong. It might just be that the sun was in the wrong place or whatever. We don't know. But photographers are usually quite smart about where they stand.
Yeah. Well, here we go again, Ben.
Yeah, we're getting ready for it, and Max Verstappen will have that pole position. He's on the outside of the front row. The way it works on the lineup here is the pole position's on the outside for the approach to turn 1. It's a reasonable distance acceleration up towards the first corner, not as long as some tracks. It's about 185 metres up towards turn 1. So you get a good start and hopefully then attacking into turn 1. Overtaking is possible, not easy. It's not the widest of corners, and we often see cars running out wide on the opening lap as people try and overtake. So that is something we'll be keeping a little bit of an eye on as we get all of these 20 cars now ready to go for the sprint race in Austria. And it looks as though this time we are getting ready for a proper start. Yes, the red lights are coming on. All set. Lights out, the sprint race is underway. Good start from Max Verstappen, absolutely perfect. And a good start from Oscar Piastri from 3rd on the grid. He is actually nearly side by side with Norris, but not at the end. Norris is 2nd, Piastri 3rd. Russell also getting away pretty effectively in 4th position. No real change amongst the front runners. Russell defending from Carlos Sainz, but Piastri attacking Lando Norris, actually having a little go at trying to take that 2nd place. Can't quite get there. Meanwhile, Lewis Hamilton trying to get past Carlos Sainz for 5th, but he can't quite do it yet either, and Sainz now on the attack of George Russell.
Yeah, and that was another example of Lando Norris not quite nailing his start. He does manage to hold on to the 2nd place, but there's a gap already building.
Sainz has gone around Russell. That was actually a really lovely move from Carlos Sainz at turn 4. He's got the Ferrari up ahead of the Mercedes.
Yeah, and the other Ferrari now battling against Perez slightly further back. So Ferrari making progress. Mercedes, who we thought would be so strong here in the early part of this race, actually falling backwards.
Yeah, that is a surprise. The Ferraris are looking stronger, as you say. Leclerc, remember, he started down in 10th, but he's now chasing after Hamilton, so he's doing a very good job indeed on this opening lap. It is Max Verstappen who leads at the end of lap 1. 2nd place for Lando Norris, 3rd for Oscar Piastri, Carlos Sainz in 4th. Then George Russell, chased by Lewis Hamilton, and behind Hamilton we've got Leclerc and then Perez. So Perez has not really had a particularly good start in the 2nd of the Red Bulls.
No, that's right. The Ferrari making his way past Perez relatively easily. Now we've got DRS enabled now. We're into lap 2. It's a very, very short lap around here, which means the very long straight, the start-finish straight, which is the DRS zone around this track, is actually, as a percentage of the lap, quite a big chunk of the overall lap. And that gives a decent opportunity to those that can maximise it.
Leclerc making really good progress. He started 10th, didn't have a great qualifying. He's already up to 7th and has overtaken Perez. So interesting to see how he goes.
Absolutely right, and there's a little battle going on just down the further back as Alonso is a bit further down than we would have thought. He's down in 14th position. Ocon and Gasly are 11th and 12th. They're just chasing after Lance Stroll. Stroll is in 10th position at this stage, so we shall see how he gets on. You don't score for 10th in a sprint race, you score down to 8th place. So final point in the sprint race goes to the 8th finisher. Max Verstappen still leading, but he's not really pulling away. Lando Norris is containing that gap at the moment.
Yeah, he's actually closed the gap over the last lap. It's gone from 7/10 of a second down to half a second. Of course, from Verstappen's point of view, he needs to build that DRS buffer, but he hasn't got it. Lando Norris now all over the back of the Red Bull, with actually Oscar Piastri, his teammate, all over the back of him. This is a really close battle between the top 3.
That was interesting. Max actually had to brake earlier than both McLarens, and now Lando Norris is really on the attack as they come down into turn 4. He can't do it there. That is a corner where we saw Sainz make a move earlier. Easy to run a bit wide, and we did see Piastri just put a wheel a little bit near the edge, didn't quite end up in the gravel. So Piastri's definitely playing a part in this as well. Both McLarens chasing down Max Verstappen. Verstappen seems to be able to get away a little bit more in the second sector.
Yeah, I just wonder how well the McLarens can work together rather than against each other at the moment, which they seem to be doing in second and third place. As they come round this final loop again, how close will they be? How much can they attack?
Do you know, that's a very good point, Jenny, because the slipstream along this long straight is really valuable around this circuit. And at the moment, it's Piastri getting that off the back of his teammate Norris. At the moment, Norris is still benefiting from the Red Bull not too far in front of him, still in the DRS zone. The problem they've got is that McLaren were fastest in sectors 1 and 3 when it came to the practice and the qualifying for the sprint yesterday. It was Verstappen who was quickest in the middle sector of the lap. And that means that it's going to be tricky for them to get past.
Well, Max Verstappen again, he's definitely struggling into turn 3 a little bit. That is the corner where the Red Bull just doesn't seem to be working so well. And with DRS, Lando Norris has actually got alongside him on the approach to turn 4. Can't quite get in far enough ahead of him to take the place, but that was close.
This is great stuff, isn't it? Max Verstappen is genuinely having to fight for this. He's having to defend. He's got his mirrors absolutely full of the papaya McLaren of Lando Norris. And it feels like this is going to go on as a ding-dong for lap after lap after lap. Norris closing up, Verstappen having to defend into that corner, take the inside line, compromising his own lap, but having to try and hold off that McLaren. This is a great fight.
It is a good battle. We're listening in from the onboard with Lando Norris as he chases down after Max Verstappen. They've gone over the line, another lap completed. We're on to lap 5 out of 23, limited to 23 after that extra formation lap. And now we're into the section where this is where he seems to catch up. The DRS is in operation here. They go through the flat-out curve at 2 and then on the brakes into turn 3, and he's gone down the inside. He's gone for it, down the inside. He's got in front briefly. Can Max Verstappen get it back on exit? I'm not sure he can. Lando just in front. Yeah, he's managing to close the door and he's got in front of Max Verstappen. They're both being chased by Oscar Piastri. Now Max goes back down the inside into turn 4 and Piastri gets alongside his teammate Lando Norris. They've got to be careful. Don't take each other off. That would really go wrong. And Lando Piastri taken that second place. So wow, it's all happening here.
I mean, who says sprint races are not exciting? This is amazing stuff. It is Verstappen still in the lead, but they've changed places 3 times over the last few corners between Norris, Piastri and Verstappen. It is Verstappen who still holds on to P1, but this is going to continue lap after lap after lap.
Great stuff, Jenny.
Zach Brown must be having kittens on the pit wall, looking at his 2 cars challenging second and third first.
Absolutely right, yes. The boss of McLaren, I wonder how he is feeling. Meanwhile, Max Verstappen still out in front. The DRS now with Oscar Piastri, who's chasing him down towards that key corner, turn 3. He's not close enough to get alongside like Lando was last time. Behind them, we've got Carlos Sainz, who's now coming under a bit more pressure again from George Russell in the Mercedes. Behind Russell is his own teammate, Lewis Hamilton. Charles Leclerc still in 7th. Perez in 8th. Magnussen in 9th. Not in the points, sadly, but a good position for the Haas. And 10th place currently, Lance Stroll. Right now, top 3 have opened out just a little bit more. We're just having a little look on our screens at the replay of some of that fun and action when Lando Norris went down the inside. Amazing bit of late braking.
Yeah, really big run with DRS into turn 3. Managed to outbrake Verstappen, and actually Norris still had the DRS because it continues out of turn 3 all the way down the hill. And it was Verstappen who then had to make a similar move, a big lunge, a brave, bold move on the brakes, which he was able to hang on to and regain that first place. So this is really nip and tuck stuff.
It is, and Oscar Piastri then was able to take advantage because they both braked so late into that corner. He then got a really good exit. He had the outside line. And in fact, I think, to be fair, Lando, knowing it's his teammate, didn't push quite as hard as he might have done if it hadn't been his teammate there.
Yeah, I suspect that's right, but we are still a Red Bull in front of 2 McLarens with a Ferrari chasing, then 2 Mercedes, and then the second Ferrari.
I'm clipping way too much.
Yeah, we'll sort it out, Max.
Max Verstappen making that report, so everything's not very quite to plan for him at the moment, but he is still leading this race by just about half a second.
And what he's talking about there is clipping. It's this phase that the engine goes through, or the hybrid system rather, in terms of flipping into recharge and running out of deployment at the end of a long straight. Perhaps that's what's giving Lando and the McLarens this opportunity to close up. One of the Red Bull's biggest strengths, particularly as we said earlier around this circuit, is its DRS performance. Very, very strong. But of course at the moment Verstappen doesn't doesn't have that. He's out in front, so it's the McLarens benefiting from DRS, not the Red Bull.
Well, it's entertaining stuff. You're listening to Hamilton's Mercedes at the moment. He's still in 6th position, tucked in behind his teammate and within the DRS zone, but they're in a group now in the DRS zones, although actually Sainz is out of DRS, so both Mercedes have got a chance perhaps of attacking Sainz because they've got DRS, and I can tell you Russell's getting a bit closer to the back of Carlos Sainz as they come down the main straight. He's having a little look, Russell. I don't think he's quite going to do it this time. He's got to watch out, otherwise his teammate Lewis Hamilton will dive past. That's always part of the game when you're in a battle like this, Mark. In fact, he's having another look to the outside. This is a chance for George Russell. Second into turn 4, and yes, he's got past. So the second DRS zone really worked for him there.
Yeah, it really did. This is a great circuit for this because it's such a short lap. There isn't time or space for the cars to really space out. So we tend to get these battles that are very, very close, which means that lots of cars now are in DRS zones of the car, or DRS reach of the cars in front. And that means that in these big zones where we do get the powerful DRS effect, they're all being able to make use of it. Russell, the latest one there, taking advantage of that and getting past the Ferrari of Carlos Sainz.
Beautiful exit that was out of turn 3. He timed that beautifully, got flat out and then picked up the DRS, as you said, went to the outside, but he had plenty of space there to use the extra speed and then tuck it in to take the apex, and that means that George Russell is now in 4th position, not potentially top 3 yet. Let's see whether he can close up at all to the McLarens that are up ahead of him, whereas Max Verstappen is still in control so far.
Just looking at how many battles are out there on track, 23 laps now because it's a 1 lap shortened race, but their tyres, some of them are really going to be hanging on at the end of this race, and other people who haven't fought through the race as much might have a chance.
Yeah, it's another good point because there's a lot of really intense battles. They're fighting each other. That's never good for tyre life. And yes, it's a 24-lap race, but on a medium tyre, that's about a stint length. You know, that's pushing your stint length to the sort of upper end. And when you're really dragging it, when you're really chasing somebody, it takes more and more life out. So we could well see performance swinging between different teams and drivers as this race comes towards the closing stages.
It's a good point. Now, I wondered if Max Verstappen was kind of thinking that a little bit when he was braking earlier than the McLarens into that crucial turn 3, not being too feisty about being the last to brake. And I wonder if his tyres will be stronger towards the end. We'll just have to wait and see, but because sometimes the Red Bull does wear its tyres out more than McLaren. We've seen that at other circuits.
Lando Norris was speaking after last weekend's race and saying there's so many parts to actually winning a race. It's not just being out in front and leading, so you have to think about every detail.
Now then, Lewis Hamilton is beginning to put an attack on Carlos Sainz. Sainz, of course, now has DRS behind Russell, but I tell you what, Lewis Hamilton's got very close now. Charles Leclerc's not too far behind as well. It's a question of whether Lewis Hamilton can try and get past Carlos Sainz. It's not going to happen right now, though, because, of course, George Russell is leading this little group. George in 4th place. He hasn't got DRS. All the ones behind do have it.
Lewis Hamilton twitching there, pushing it through that corner there. The back end just stepping out. So Lewis on the ragged edge, really hoping to get past this Ferrari. There's still a long way to go. We're at lap 10 out of 20, what is now 23 laps because of the aborted start and the extra formation lap. So not even at the halfway point. And as Jenny rightly said, no one seemingly looking after their tyres that much here in the middle of these really intense, tight battles.
Well, it's good to see such good battles, there's no doubt about it. Max Verstappen leads by just over a second now, though, so he's got out of the DRS zone from Oscar Piastri in 2nd place, Lando Norris in 3rd, George Russell now in 4th place, having got past Carlos Sainz. Sainz now busily trying to defend from Lewis Hamilton. Let's just see if that gap gets any tighter as they come down the main straight up to maximum speeds and then back on the brakes hard into turn 3. No changes there. Hamilton getting closer to Sainz. Behind them, Perez running a rather lonely 8th place, and then down in 9th place we have Kevin Magnussen, Lance Stroll in 10th, and then the two Alpines have made the top 10 in qualifying yesterday, but they're both outside of it at this stage, with Esteban Ocon in 11th place and Pierre Gasly in 12th. Yuki Tsunoda in 13th, Fernando Alonso down in 14th, and the top 15 completed by Nico Hülkenberg.
Tell you what, who's having a good race? It's Kevin Magnussen in the Haas. He's P9 now. They're points paying for the first 8. He would dearly love to get back in the points, and yes, he's quite some way off Perez, but if he's looking after those tyres and making good decisions through this race, maybe there's a point there.
Yeah, that's a good point. Although Haas seemed to get lots of 11th places in the Grand Prix, just missing out on a point, and a 9th place in the sprint would be just the same.
I'm so glad Jonian Palmer camera isn't here for you to make that comment, because he was always 11th. It was like a painful existence for him.
Can I just say, how good is it that we've got the top 4 teams even now all battling each other? Yeah, the top 3, the Verstappen and the 2 McLarens, have broken away a tiny bit. We've got Mercedes versus Ferrari. We've got McLaren versus Red Bull. And it's been years since we've genuinely been able to say this.
Just listening into Ferrari and Charles Leclerc being told to lift and coast, just slightly, but lift and coast is the order.
Okay, that's interesting to know. Meanwhile, it's a little battle between the Alpines. I do hope they can keep this clean. We know the rivalry between Esteban Ocon and Pierre Gasly can be pretty feisty at times. And we also know Pierre Gasly staying with the team, whereas Esteban Ocon is moving on from the Alpine team.
I can only think that call to Charles Leclerc can be sort of temperature related rather than anything like fuel saving, because we had the extra formation lap, which would suggest that no one should need to save fuel. Highly unlikely that you underfuel significantly in a sprint race, because the idea of a safety car is pretty slim. So we had an extra formation lap. I can only think that either temperature of things like brakes or engine, or even the fact that their tyres are really struggling, means that they're having to now lift and coast at the end of straights.
That's really interesting, and I'm not too surprised, because the temperatures we're seeing, the air temperature's nearly 30 degrees now, track temperature's higher than we tend to see normally here.
Yeah, if you look at Lewis Hamilton as well, he's driving out of the dirty air and getting into the cool off of turn 4, so they're obviously slightly overheating, and they've not set the cars up for this level of heat, supposedly.
No, that's a fair point. I think, in a sprint race scenario, 23 laps, as we said, you're going to go for your first sort of 5, 6, 7 laps, which are the opportunities to really try and make progress and make those overtakes when everyone's bunched up. And then you tend to get this phase, which we're in now, where everyone settles down a bit, gets the temperatures back under control, maybe starts to think about looking after tyres. And then towards the end, perhaps you get a little bit of a tyre offset or a performance offset, which you can utilise to try and have another go. So I think this is the sort of calm before the storm as we get to the later stages, and we might see the battle start to re-emerge.
Well, right now, I have to say, Max Verstappen, whether he looked after the tyres more cautiously in those early little battles with McLaren, he is definitely easing away now. He's got the gap up to 2 seconds to Oscar Piastri. So whether he was managing the tyres carefully in the early stage and it's working now, who knows whether it's going to continue like that. We've still got 10 laps to go, so we'll keep an eye on that and just watch whether Max can continue to pull it away. It's not a huge lead, but he has built it up now to a couple of seconds. Riding on board, one of the Alpines, as these two are still battling. Ocon versus Gasly for 11th position at this stage, both of them chasing after Lance Stroll, but no changes right now. Ocon still holding off his teammate, and behind them both Yuki Tsunoda and Fernando Alonso in 13th and 14th.
As it stands, lap 14, Verstappen out in front with Oscar Piastri second and Lando Norris third, would mean that Verstappen would take a 71-point lead in the championship, because Norris would just lose that point advantage that he thought he might have.
It's interesting, actually. I wonder if we get to a point at some point when McLaren even start thinking about the possibility of a driver championship with Lando Norris. He's clearly of the 2 McLaren drivers the favourite and the one that's in the best position for that. These little points differences can make a big difference come the end of the year.
You were a mechanic at McLaren when they had 2 major fighters in Lewis Hamilton and Fernando Alonso. That was an even more difficult time.
I'm still going through therapy.
I'm sure you are. Yeah, that was a fascinating time. But look at Piastri now coming under a bit more threat from Lando Norris here. So this is interesting for second place.
Yeah, that's right. They've closed right up behind each other. Lando with, of course, the DRS behind his teammate. And, it may well be that we get that scenario we just talked about, where it's in the team's interest, certainly in Lando's interest, to find a way past. Either just through a general battle, and he may be able to utilise DRS to help him with that, or perhaps the team might get on the radio and say, look, don't get his way too much.
No, that's right. But of course, scoring points from both drivers is also very, very important in the Constructors' Championship as well. McLaren at the moment are still behind Ferrari in the Constructors' Championship. Ferrari second to Red Bull. Not a huge gap between them, so they wouldn't do enough by finishing where they are now, because of the points aren't so big in the sprint race. But nonetheless, it does matter to the team to try and get into second place as we go through a few more races.
Yeah, I think the split is 26 points if it finished like this between McLaren and Ferrari in third and second. And then first place, obviously, Red Bull out in front with 339 if it were to end like this.
Okay, well, let's keep an eye on this. Lando Norris still with the DRS available now behind his teammate Oscar Piastri, so this is giving him a chance to get a little closer as Max Verstappen continues to just eke out a tiny bit more lead, and Norris definitely showing some slightly faster lap times than his teammate. So there is going to be an opportunity. He's getting quite close as they head down towards turn 4, but he's not taking any risks just yet.
Yeah, he's closing by more than 2.5 tenths a lap at the moment, so he's right up underneath the rear wing of the other McLaren, under the rear wing of Piastri. The longer it goes on like this, of course, the more it's damaging Lando Norris's tyres, and the more Max Verstappen is actually getting away. So I suspect the team or Lando need to be quite decisive in this phase if they've got hopes of closing down the lead and taking some sort of victory here.
Daniel Ricciardo has just passed Logan Sargent further down the order. That's moved him up into 16th place. Sargent down into 17th. But, you know, Daniel, he really needs some special results this weekend and next weekend at Silverstone for the British Grand Prix if he's going to hold on to his seat in Formula One. And I have to say, things are not really going his way.
No, not looking good for Daniel. I suspect if you think the bigger picture, I think from a Red Bull perspective, it probably is time to start thinking about the future of that team. They may well have drivers moving on. Even talk of Max Verstappen potentially going somewhere in the future. So do they start putting people in that junior team that potentially could be a succession plan for them?
Yeah, that's a lot of thinking going on for Red Bull at the moment. Meanwhile, the battle between Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris is still one of the closest battles that we've got in this race, and this is for second and third as Max Verstappen is just eking away. He's got the gap up to 2.5 seconds right now, so it's looking comfortable at this stage for Max Verstappen. But what are the teams saying, I wonder, to the drivers at McLaren?
Exactly. It's a bit early in the season, isn't it, round 11, to be imposing team orders at this stage in a sprint race. I don't know, that might do more harm than good in taking away from Piastri rather than celebrating the team's performance and embracing him.
It certainly looks that way. I think if they were going to make a team order call, it would have happened about 3 laps ago, because, as I said, every one of these laps it rolls on is actually damaging the chances of Lando Norris if that was going to be their favoured option. So it looks like they're letting the drivers race, which I think is great, you know, from that perspective, because Oscar Piastri has done a great job to get himself back into P2 after a couple of disappointing weekends. So from a confidence perspective, today is going to do him a world of good.
Yeah, I agree with that. And also, because of the way the format now works, you do not, for example, line up on the final grid, the Grand Prix grid, based on where you finish in the sprint race. I think that could have had a bit more of an effect for teams sometimes. Now, this is a separate race. They'll go on to qualifying later on today for the main race. And I actually quite like that layout, because if it was where you finished in the sprint race now, then there might have been more argument about saying, let's put Lando ahead.
Agreed. But, I mean, look, this is not over yet. I think Lando will certainly have a different opinions. He will want to get to the end of this race ahead of his teammate, and at the moment he is literally trying everything to do that. Still closely behind him, still pushing, still with DRS, so it's certainly not a done deal yet.
And Lewis Hamilton may have a better chance now of getting past Carlos Sainz for 5th place, because Sainz has dropped away from the DRS zone of George Russell. So that actually does help Lewis Hamilton, because he's within DRS range of the Ferrari, and it might give Lewis a chance going into these last few laps to claim another spot. We do think the Mercedes is working well. It hasn't quite got the same pace as the McLarens or the Red Bull, and whether they're going to find a bit more for qualifying later, we shall wait and see. But right now, Lando Norris still keeping the pressure on Oscar Piastri, but it is Piastri holding on to that second position. Yeah,
Lando chasing hard. It's actually disappointing a little bit, isn't it, from the Mercedes, because early signs, certainly in the practice session that we had yesterday, put Mercedes right up there, if not at the very front, and even other drivers talking about, particularly George Russell as it was at the time, being a major threat to Verstappen and the dominance of this weekend. When it came to qualifying, and we're seeing it again this morning, it's not quite come to fruition yet.
Absolutely. Lewis Hamilton still not quite been able to find a way past Carlos Sainz at this stage, and behind Lewis Hamilton, Charles Leclerc has not got any closer. Leclerc still in 7th place, having started in 10th, so that first lap did work well for Charles Leclerc, a winner here in Austria in the past, and he's had some wonderful battles with Max Verstappen over the years around this track. Max, of course, has become the rather dominant force around this circuit in recent years, and it looks like he's going to dominate again today. He's definitely on target for yet another victory in his name here.
Do you think the teams can watch this and learn how best to attack tomorrow when it comes to the Grand Prix and the big points are available?
Absolutely. You know, the sprint, because we only have one practice session on a sprint weekend, the sprint itself is almost like the long runs to some extent that we used to do in practice in a more traditional weekend. So you can learn a huge amount about tyre life, about race setup, and exactly as you say, about how to utilise things like DRS and where the best points to attack and defend. Even also the strategy for deploying things like your ERS system. Hugely important in terms of learning from today that will carry forward to tomorrow.
And the good thing is they are allowed to change the cars a bit between the end of this race and the start of qualifying.
Yeah, so they come out of Parc Fermé, which at the moment prevents them from making mechanical changes. They'll come out of that at the end of this race, meaning they can effectively do whatever they want up until qualifying, and once they leave the garage in qualifying, then they're back into Parc Fermé, restricted ahead of tomorrow's race.
So that's where really clever teams who've learnt from this race can make those subtle changes that could affect the outcome tomorrow.
Absolutely.
Well, we're going across the line with 20 laps completed now out of the 23 for this sprint race. Max Verstappen is still putting together the faster laps. He's about a tenth quicker on that last lap than Oscar Piastri, having been up to 3/10 quicker. The gap now up to 3.7 seconds. Still no difference between Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris. They're still close, and Lewis Hamilton again putting a bit of pressure on Carlos Sainz.
I think what we're seeing to some extent is exactly what Jenny touched on earlier on, is that we went out so hard at the beginning of this race with so many intense battles all the way through the field, in fact, and it was Verstappen who was of course leading the race that perhaps benefited most from that. He didn't have to follow in the dirty air of anybody else, a little bit more time management than the others were able to do, and maybe that's what we're now seeing him reap the rewards of, in that the likes of McLaren, particularly Piastri, just struggling to get the performance out of the tyres now. Maybe the same with people like Sainz and Russell and Hamilton, Leclerc as well. It's Verstappen that, as he does so often, was able to get in front through qualifying and then control this race to some extent.
All 20 cars are still running at this point. That'll keep the mechanics happy in the pit lane right now, because there's not a lot of time to get them ready for qualifying. We'll just watch Nico Hülkenberg, who's been making a bit of an attack on Fernando Alonso, which didn't quite come off.
No, almost. He got round the outside, didn't he? In fact, yeah, then Alonso must have out-dragged him, I think, back down the straight. But disappointing weekend for Alonso so far. He's been outperformed by his own teammates. The car in itself has not been great. But actually it's Stroll of the two Aston Martins that's been the most promising of those two over the course of the weekend. So Fernando Alonso going slightly missing this weekend. Yeah, I agree. Funnily enough, this has not always been a great track. I don't think he's ever had a podium at this track. It's a funny one, isn't it, when you think... I know in his championship winning days, they weren't racing here in Austria. In fact, it stopped for a while after 2003, and then there was a big gap to 2014, and that was a major period of his great success in Formula One. But it still feels a bit odd that he's never had a podium here. Meanwhile, we're on lap 22 out of 23 right now, and we'll be getting into the final lap shortly, and it's still the same situation. Max Verstappen crosses the line. We are on the last lap. His lead is now up to 4.2 seconds over the two McLarens, with Oscar Piastri in second. Lando's close. Is there going to be a final blast here from Lando Norris? Well, just watch this closely, because as they go down the flat out straight, I'm not sure he's really quite close enough. Heading down towards turn 3, the main overtaking spot. He's close, not close enough. One more chance, really, as they head up towards turn 4. Yeah, he'll get one more boost of DRS. He's right behind the sister McLaren, but I don't think he's close enough. Oscar Piastri just doing enough to defend and build that lead as Lando closes and closes and closes right underneath the rear wing, but just not enough. And it looks like, with Verstappen surely taking the victory, the McLarens are going to finish with Piastri in front of Norris. It does look that way, yeah, and I don't know how much frustration that's going to cause for Lando, but of course we have a completely separate qualifying going into the Grand Prix for tomorrow. But this has been an entertaining race, specifically in the beginning of the race, but Max Verstappen has taken full control as he comes out of the last corner. Max Verstappen wins the sprint race in Austria. That's 3 out of 3 sprint race wins so far this year for Max Verstappen, the championship leader. Second goes to Oscar Piastri. Third goes to Lando Norris. He didn't quite manage to get back past his teammate. Fourth place for George Russell. Fifth for Carlos Sainz, ahead of Lewis Hamilton. And then Charles Leclerc in 7th, Perez in 8th, Magnussen in 9th, and Lance Stroll in 10th. But remember, it's just the top 8 that actually score. So Perez picking up the final point there for the Red Bull team. And there it is, victory for Max.
Okay, solid effort. Well done, mate.
Well, that was spicy, but good result.
Yeah, that was very spicy on the first couple of laps, but well done. Very, very good pace and well managed.
3 out of 3 wins in sprints this year. It's also a hat-trick of sprint wins here in Austria for him. He's won the sprint races here in 2022, 2023, and now in 24 as well.
Yeah, and they'll be very happy, at least on that side of the garage. It is the Red Bull ring, and Red Bull have won. They'll be disappointed, of course, for Sergio Perez. It was qualifying that really hampered any chances of him doing particularly well. But Perez just on a run at the moment that's not good enough from the team perspective, and not good enough for himself either. He'll be starting to question his own confidence more and more as we roll through these rounds. But disappointing on one side, very, very happy on the other.
Indeed. We shall see how this all pans out later in the day for qualifying and for the race. It does make things pretty exciting, but we shall see. The sprint winner, very much, no doubt about it in the end, Max Verstappen, even though at one point it really did look as though Lando Norris had got him. Well, he did get him, but he not for long enough to stay in front. So great fun to watch.
It really was, and it just shows the measure of Max Verstappen when he's put under that much pressure and actually remains composed and calm. It's just so in control, and I've been so impressed by him this season.
Yeah, especially over the last few races when that challenge really has come from the likes of Lando Norris and McLaren. It's typically been, even though he's been pushed into it, it's typically been Verstappen that's succeeded more times than not, because the team and him rarely make mistakes, do they?
Slots his steering wheel back into the car and goes onto the tarmac. The top 3 have lined up on the start-finish straight. He waves to the audience and the crowd, who are pretty much all his fans. It's a sea of orange, isn't it? And they will be supporting him and the battle that he won. And I mean, he just goes and shakes, well, does a kind of high five. It was one of those high fives you'd like to do again. Gets weighed, obviously. Piastri goes up to get weighed as well. They get their little slip which says exactly the weight. I'd hate to be an F1 driver for that reason alone.
Well, it was a fascinating race, that. And Lando, yeah, having to settle for 3rd place. No big smile on his face right at the moment, I have to say. But Max Verstappen looks very, very calm.
Well, do you know, the fact that Lando's so disappointed with 3rd is a measure of where he's at right now, isn't it? He wants a championship. He's not content with just a podium anymore, which, you know, go back 6 months, he'd been really happy with that. But that's a really a measure of where him and the team are, which I think is great.
He's learning so much, isn't he, this season? Yeah. And the team are as well. I've spoken to people at McLaren and Ferrari, and both of them say, you know, we're not there yet, because we're not Red Bull, and Red Bull have had such a history and Mercedes winning, but actually they need to get back to that championship winning ideal.
Well, we can now hear from our top 3 drivers in the sprint race with Alex Words.
Well done, 3rd position. I'm pretty sure you would like to be a bit higher than this. But nevertheless, it was a sensational sprint for us to watch. But please talk us through those few Grand Prix races.
I mean, a good race between us, especially with Max at the beginning, was good fun. Probably some things I definitely should have done a bit better in my battle, but I understand that, and the pace of the car was very strong, especially the end of the race. And I had a good battle trying to get past Oscar, but just didn't have enough speed with how much you lose in the middle sector with the dirty air. So it was a good race, a good load of points for us as McLaren, so a good job to the team, and of course Max and Oscar for the podium.
Yeah, you think as a team you could have played more together with Oscar and you to get Max today?
I don't think so, honestly. Like there, we're fair to race, and it was just too difficult to get past. But the pace was good. I don't think we would have had probably the pace to go with Max. I think he was maybe that little bit too quick for us today. But tomorrow's another day, and we'll try again.
Yeah, thank you. A quick one before the other colleagues are ready. I think you won them out today with the pressure you applied. Lap 3, fantastic dive bomb. So my hats off to you. Maybe talk me through your mindset in this aggressive move.
Yeah, I think a little bit like I saw at the end. I think once things settle in too much, it's difficult to. Once the tires get too hot, it's difficult to do too much. So I had to make the most of my opportunity. Then I messed it up and left the door open like an amateur. So, like I said, some things to improve, but we're there and we can definitely give them a fight tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oscar Piastri, you are already a sprint winner. Today you finished second. Are you happy with that position?
Yes and no. I think, obviously finished one spot higher than I started, but just didn't quite have the pace in the second half of that one. And I thought Max and Lando were going to pave the way for me to come through at one point, but not quite. And some things to look at for this afternoon and for tomorrow's race, but we'll definitely take the points. A really good haul compared to the other teams around us.
We still need to ask you, lap 5, an ice-cold, beautifully executed maneuver. You just needed popcorn. You had the best seat in this battle. Talk us through. What did you think about when they battled? Did you plan it and your execution?
I could see that they were battling quite hard, and into turn 4 I saw the move was quite late, and I knew that there'd be an opportunity on the exit. I was hoping I would get both, but just bided my time and tried my best. I think I had probably one opportunity to try and get Max the lap after, but just didn't quite have the pace after that. So in that one, being patient at the start paid off a bit.
Thank you, and all the best for tomorrow.
Thank you.
Max Verstappen, winner. Let's not talk about football. Sorry to beat you. Austria won against Holland, unless you really want to talk about it. But well done for such a strong comeback. Amazing start. Maybe the perception of the race for you?
Yeah, it was a good first lap, I would say. But then, once the DRS opens, it's very hard to get out of it. Took a few laps. A few exciting battles as well, but I think once we cleared the DRS, then I could do a bit more my own race, and then it looked all a bit better. But you could see they have two cars that are pushing flat out, trying to, of course, make it difficult for me. And we had to work for it in that race. So a few things to think about what we could do better for tomorrow, especially. Because I think tomorrow also is going to be, even like longer races and harder on the tires. So it's going to be quite interesting to see how that will evolve.
Okay, Max, but you spoke about learning things for tomorrow. We've seen around lap 4, 5, you had a lot of clipping. For those who don't know, it's the energy recovery, and that slowed you down on the straight. Is that maybe your weak spot for tomorrow as well?
It's just because they're in the DRS, so they use, of course, a bit less energy because naturally they spend less time on the straight, just catching up to me. And I think, once they were out, then I could go back to my normal management, and then everything was fine again.
Okay, Max, so tomorrow you expect still a tough battle. Do you have anyone else on the cards in your rear view mirror as the McLarens for tomorrow?
Yeah, I need to have a look at the whole race. I was very busy with myself, so we have to look into the data about the others as well. And we'll see if we can do better tomorrow.
Good. You love it in Austria?
Sorry?
You're loving it in Austria?
Yeah, it's always good to be here.
Very good. So lucky you. We have Gerhard Berger, superstar, Austrian, former Grand Prix winner, giving you the prize.
So Gerhard Berger gives Max Verstappen a little plate with a number 1 on it for winning the sprint race. A spicy sprint race, he described it as. What will come with the Grand Prix qualifying? It takes place later today, 2:55. We will be on BBC Sport website. Make sure you join us. You can even speak to a smart speaker and ask them to play qualifying, and hey presto, we'll be there. So join us later. It should be interesting. Can McLaren get the better of Red Bull, or is this the Red Bull ring and the home of Red Bull, and they'll have the advantage? Tune in to see. This has been an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live.